Does GDPR apply to me?
Okay, so this is coming up quite a bit, the GDPR question, and the answer is it depends, and it depends a couple things. If you're actually hiring and you have a European citizen at your company and they have dual citizenship, it completely applies even with one employee. So the location doesn't matter whatsoever. The EU is protecting down to an email address what you're doing with their citizens' data. And so if you have most of your employees are here, but then you have a conference, and then you have a bunch of folks from Europe come over to your conference, and you're gathering data, this is an issue. And it's an issue not just whether you're collecting the credit card information. If you're having a marketing event, or you're having a webinar, if you're having anything that bridges access from a European citizen, it's a problem that you have to pay attention to. So you're going to have to get really good at governance of data, and which is a part of the underlying strategy of data governance as a whole is a great vision for a CIO, period. And so GDPR is actually great because it forces what I believe is a perfect agenda, is that you really need to get good at understanding data, understanding where data is, and that's perfectly in the world of a CIO. And it's not necessarily in the world of the CMO, or it's not necessarily in the world of the COO. This is why the CIOs are going to be the business leaders, the CEOs of the future, is because you're going to get so good at being able to understand data that this is not going to matter whatsoever, because you're going to be a great steward of this. So GDPR has a big impact, both of European citizens on your staff, contractors, people attending conferences, webinars. The impact is pretty wide, and that's why people are concerned about it. So one final point about this is that, well, not about this, but a different called the Dan Sullivan question. This is a really interesting question, and I believe it's really powerful for a leader to understand this. And it's a small, tiny little book, but Dan Sullivan runs an organization that about 100 people, and he's been running this for about 40 years, and largely got launched based on this question. And it really asks, as a leader, when you're sitting down with people, is you're asking them to where they think you're asking them to look at a landscape of between a year to 3 years, preferably 3 years, but a year will work. And you're asking what has to transform, what has to transpire over that year time frame or 3 year time frame, if we're in the future sitting down, for it to be a great success for the individual. And they can be asked personally, it can be asked in a business context, but it really gets people thinking about what has to happen for it to be a big win. And then the next part of this is asking, what are the obstacles, what are the dangers and obstacles that could get in the way of that happening, and really gets the person to think about what the obstacles are. And then you ask about what opportunities would be there if you could remove those obstacles. So if you took those obstacles away, what opportunities would be able to be transpired? And then the final is, what strengths do they have personally that could help them in that journey of accomplishing that? And then what strengths do they have in their team? So if it's asked in a business context, where are the strengths? Most people want to know exactly where all the weaknesses are, but if you start thinking about where you're strong, and you can take some of those strengths to start on the journey, is important. So it's a really great leadership book focused on one question, and I've used it a ton. I find real great value in it, and I also find great value in asking myself the question constantly, and it develops a lot of clarity of vision. So Dan Sullivan, Dan Sullivan's question: ask it and transform everyone's future.